Good morning, everyone. Have you ever had the answer to something sitting in front of your face, but you couldn't see it or you couldn't do it? Not for a long time. I've been feeling for some time to do specific things, and I kind of knew what they were, and I kind of understood them, but I didn't do them and I haven't been doing them. And one of them is to both explain and push Christo Tantrism deeper and further. And so that is what I am doing now. So what that means is every morning at 6 a.m., I'm going to talk about the spirituality that I have found for myself. I'm going to provide explanations, stories, meditations, experiences, and I'm going to invite other people into these structures. So if you would like to be with me at 6 a.m. and have communion, connection, and spiritual uplift at Mountain Time, let me know. And I will send you a Zoom link and we will commune. There's been several things that have slowed me down, one of which has been perfection. How good am I really at 6 a.m.? How good are any of us really that early? But I thought that's not what matters. What matters is the desire and the focus of the communion. I went to a healer recently, and she told me to schedule, and it was like a glass bell ringing. I have not had a schedule for some time. And in fact, the clock has been turning around. And one of the reasons I haven't had a schedule, this is part two. First of all, perfection was the first thing that was holding me back. Number two was this misguided idea that nobody would be present or would show up if I started talking at the time I wanted to. But that doesn't matter either, does it? Anyone who wants to show up can show up. Anyone who finds these ideas important can do so. And anyone who doesn't have to. Voila, problem solved. So many people have been coming to me lately and asking if I can help with their deprogramming, their deconditioning, their dehypnosis, their clarity, their understanding, their whatever it might be. And I've constantly been thinking, how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, it's easy. We just do it. That we just take time and exactly access those things. So I know how to put myself in a state to be able to access or go certain places energetically and spiritually. And so we just pick a time and we do it. And if people want to show up, awesome. So anyway, here I am with a message for today. Message number one being, Jesus is not just misquoted, as Bart Ehrman says, he's misunderstood. So how do we misunderstand Jesus? Well, the big way that I think Jesus is misunderstood is we think Jesus is anti-body. We think Jesus is anti-sex. We think Jesus is anti-pleasure. We think because Christianity seems, in large part, we hear about puritanism to be towards work and for effort and not in any way focused on hedonism, which seems to be a sin. We think that Jesus and true spirituality has nothing to do with the body. But as Wilhelm Reich discovered, it's the exact opposite. Our bodies are part of our absolute healing. Pleasure heals, orgasmic bliss heals. And so for me, if I'm going to create a religion, And Jesus is not against pleasure. Jesus is for the abundant life. I am come that they may have life and they may have it abundantly. And so a more fulfilling life, a more enjoyable life, a more pleasurable life. That's exactly Jesus right there. And so we, as disciples of Jesus, or people who want to learn from Jesus, or those who want to gain the information that Jesus had, have the opportunity to learn how to live that life as well and to help others do it. But there's no framework within which to do that in the Western world, I believe, because it has been removed, changed, censored, and so much has been destroyed. Look at the Crusades, look at the Inquisition. The church has been a source of destruction for a long time, and not healing and not growth. And even the churches that pop up since then, they haven't been much better. So, as we return to the East, India, fascinating was when Britain began to understand the Indian culture more deeply, they began to be assimilated by it. There were Sanskrit chairs at Oxford, Cambridge, many major institutions leading up to the 1900s, because they saw in the late 19th century, because they saw that there was a lot of valuable information in India. Indeed, there's books going back thousands of years, up to, as I understand it, ridiculously long amounts of time, 3,000, 4,000 years, where the language has been uncorrupted, where it's exactly as it is today, as it was then, where there are grammars and pronunciation guides, and these probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages of books that are still around, somehow preserved in all that time, contain tremendous wisdom. Not all of it is easy. There's disagreements, there's confusion, there's various viewpoints, there's various teachers, but there's unbelievable wisdom in India that's been destroyed or erased or burned from every other culture. Even when the Mayan and Aztec cultures were found, there's a couple books remaining. People don't really understand them or study them, but most of it was just erased and destroyed and eradicated. And somehow India, for whatever reason, remained the library of the world, and its libraries weren't burned, even as the library of Alexandria, metaphorically and physically, was burned. And so much information was lost. There's a lot of information in occult and esoteric libraries in the West, but normal humans don't have connection to them. They don't have any access. The books are being hidden, censored. The Vatican Library, for example. And now we have created the ultimate tool of dissemination of information, the internet, that can literally put any information anywhere in the world. And if you notice, corporations and governments for the last 15 years, 20 years since the creation of the internet, 25 now, there we go, I'm getting old, 25 years, have been working on ways to prevent information from getting from one place to another, from preventing access from one place to another, and if they'd had their way, preventing information between people from going from one place to another. Meaning, you can't watch this movie in this area. You can't watch, this video is unavailable in your region, as YouTube tells me so often. Or this film, this book is not available. When Google first started, they started to scan in every book, but they were stopped by nefarious powers. And so much information is being blocked. But the thing is, India had this information, and there was so much depth to it. Well, there was a conspiracy to keep the masses ignorant. There always has been. And so that had to be shut down. A lot of these ideas were connected to Hitler, strangely enough, and Hitler was seeing the value of them and was understanding them, and the idea of Aryans and the white race and all these things. These are all Indian ideas. These are Occidental ideas. And yet they were used as foundations for the Third Reich, and even the symbol, the swastika, comes from India. And so they became demonized and cast out after that point, but none of that had anything to do with Hitler. It was just borrowed and stolen, but that was the intellectual foundation, or the borrowed or stolen intellectual foundation upon which Germany began its rise to power. So one feature of the beautiful information that is available in India is writings about intimacy, sexuality, pleasure. You've heard of the Kama Sutra, which, if you've ever read it, is ridiculously detailed in terms of who should be having sex with who, depending on their body types, depending on their genital types, what positions to use depending on the type of genitals you have with someone else, how and when to have sex, aphrodisiacs. It's just very, very detailed. And this is just one of hundreds of documents. Everything is discussed in these documents, in these scriptures that exist in India. What to eat and when, family relationships, community, spirituality, meditation, especially, paths to God, exercises for various paths of spirituality, and it's all spelled out. As I said, there's different flavors and different paths, but at least you have different flavors and paths to choose from, and you can pick and choose and find those things that work for you and implement those. So as I began my researches about 12 years ago into pleasure, into the body, I want to understand sex, sexuality, intimacy. I found the teachings of the Tantras, or Tantra, from India to be very valuable for that. It's true that I don't really understand Sanskrit yet. I'm taking secondhand information, or third-hand, depending on where I've gotten it from. But I'm gathering as much information as I can, and I'm using that to create a spiritual foundation, which includes the teachings of Jesus, which for me are the purest, most powerful relational teachings that have ever existed. And I will talk about my relationship to Jesus as this moves on, and connecting it to ideas that I believe Jesus espoused, and I can explain why in further recordings and further examples, but that which have been lost and destroyed by the powers that be, by the forces of evil, to keep us weak and powerless. The greatest power we possess, the greatest energy, has to do with sexuality and intimacy. If we know how to use that power, we can apply it towards healing, transformation, growth, and many other aspects of our lives. So this is what I'm going to talk about. This is what I'm going to explain as we dive into Christo Tantrism, as I explain what I mean by that, as I explain the doctrines, the rituals, the path, and the things that I've found to help me make sense of the world, find freedom spiritually, connect more deeply to Jesus, to the divine, understand my own divinity, provide a logical and moral framework to live, and a way to connect with others. And I'm going to be guiding that through meditations and experiences and I was waiting. I've always been waiting for a group, for a place, for all these things, but now I see I have to start and I have to move with this. So I'm going to do it in this way, which will be accessible to everyone no matter where you are, and begin speaking and sharing so that I can get this information out and those that are interested can begin to move on this journey with me. I love you. God bless. Aho and amen.